have called me a domestic terrorist, a hate monger, conspiracy theorist, and they said that I created a career out of spreading lies about Agenda 21, which was just simply a nice suggestion on how we might take, a voluntary suggestion, how we might take care of our environment a little bit. And I disagreed, so they did all these reports. So before I start, I want to share a little story with you, something that happened to me recently. I was invited down to Boca Raton a few months ago to attend a conference. I wasn't invited to speak, I was there to learn. And the purpose of the conference was to help particularly people starting new businesses and stuff to understand all the new technology that's coming at them and how to use it and that sort of thing. But I got there early and I was standing in the back of the room. There weren't very many people there yet. And a gentleman walked in the door, and he was one of the main speakers. This was a guy who has written a book called How to Deal with Billionaires, and apparently knows Musk and Bezos and some of these people. And he walks up and he shakes my hand, introduces himself, and I introduce myself, and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I work with local activists to try to help them organize, be more effective in their local level." He says, No. What do you do?" I said, "Well, I've written several books and do a lot of articles and so forth." No. What do you do?" Well, by the third thing I said, No. What do you do? I said, absolute aggravation. I said, "I hate tyrannical government and I'm working to stop it." He said, "There you go." Well, I was about ready to, as he walked away, I was about ready to bash him in the head, but I did let him live. But I thought about it after that, and I thought, I have been an activist in the cause for freedom for 57 years, and I never once really asked myself a question like that. I always think about what's my next project, whatever. This guy had known me for less than 2 minutes and got that answer out of me. What do I do? And I thought, that is amazing. So I thought tonight I would start with you. Why are you here? What do you do? What do you intend to do with what we are going to learn tonight moving forward? Put that in mind. That is my challenge to you. What do you do? And ask yourselves that and try to come up with an answer that's really as honest as you can possibly come up with. Deal? All right. Let me begin with the threat that we're all facing. We are warned repeatedly that the world is facing the destruction of our climate, and it all is being caused by human society. You're all guilty of it. You're destroying the planet. Every action that you take to warm and cool your home, drive your car, cook your food, take a vacation, or even produce your clothes are a threat to the environment and must be controlled. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about that today. I'm sure a lot of you have already studied a lot of it and understand climate change and know full well that there is no massive consensus of scientists advocating this lie. There is no consensus in science. You could have 50 scientists over here who say this is what we found, and one guy over here and say, no, that's wrong. Now he can say over there, what do you do? It's like, so Elon Musk and his Doge team have clearly exposed the massive amounts of our tax dollars being funneled into the forces behind this lie. But we must understand, the forces that we face today are diabolical. They are not going to surrender 1 inch of their ground. For decades, they have been using tactics to they're getting you to voluntarily surrender your liberties and destroy your culture. And they aren't going to give that up. Their tactic, fear. Fear of what? Fear of environmental Armageddon. Their tactic has given the radical green movement the ability to shut down any opposition. I have environmentalists get in my face and say, it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. Ooh. That's the tactic. That's what they do. If you want to stop them, if you want to win, you absolutely must understand that this is not just Democrats and misguided politicians who come up with kind of crazy little things. They have an agenda. I'm going to say it over and over and over again, an agenda. And if you understand the agenda, you know how to fight. If you ignore it, if you don't know anything about it, you're going to lose. The agenda is getting them to keep moving forward. They will not back down, no matter what. There is a global force with this agenda to take control worldwide. That's what it's about. It has nothing to do with protecting the environment, but that is the excuse behind every policy designed to divide, conquer, and basically eliminate our entire country, our national sovereignty, our system of government. All of those things are targets because they are a threat to their move to control. I've studied this agenda for almost 35 years. I've worked to alert people all over the world of the true intent, the tactics being used, and the forces behind it. And, you know, as they attack me in almost every publication in the country, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, who you've heard about recently, also did an article on me. And I've often said, all I have ever done is quote them. That, you know, I'm a liar? Well, then they told lies. You know, but the United Nations is the one that said Agenda 21 was a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. That is not some innocent, voluntary little idea. That is the groundwork for control. Comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of society. That has now expanded to Agenda 2030, the Green New Deal, the Great Reset. Each with more detail, more tactics, and more forces to carry out the plan, but it's all the same plan as it's always been. However, a friend of mine, the late Rosa Koire, who was the head of Democrats against Agenda 21, she defined sustainable development is the policy that they use to promote this. You hear it in every single thing you do. Sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. Sustainable food growth, sustainable energy, sustainable housing, sustainable. Rosa Koire defines sustainable this way, quote, UN Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all information, all energy, and all human beings in the world. Inventory and control. Can it be any clearer? Now, what Trump and Doge have uncovered are the hidden billions that have been taken out of your pockets, and they are being forced, these forces are getting this agenda to carry it all out. They're using your tax dollars to buy the news media so that they will only report on that and pay no attention to you. There are scientific journals that will not print a single word that is not in favor of the climate change agenda. And massive amounts of cash have gone to create and fund an army of activists trained to enforce the agenda at every level of government. But I must tell you, as such revelations are pouring out from the Doge team in their findings, my greatest fear is that good Americans, conservatives, conservative activists, patriots, you who fought for the cause of liberty and you fought hard, and I fully understand how hard you fought and how much you just really want to live life. My greatest fear is that you will now take this opportunity to stay home and let Trump finish them off. I'm telling you now, if you do that, you will lose. This is an opportunity for the first time, and maybe a lot of those of us being activists in our activity, for the first time, we have a president who is exposing what they're doing at the federal level. He is showing these things. The tinfoil is falling off our heads like confetti. This is the time not to sit back and go, oh, okay. This is the time to charge forward and fight like you've never fought before. We have to do that to save this country. Donald Trump cannot do that alone. Their first actions at this point are to discredit Trump. And they cry and they swear, where they're really swearing, and they initiate violence, all the while calling Trump and his team Nazis and destroying democracy. Every time I hear that, there's destroying democracy, I'm going to say, good. You know, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And if you don't believe that, ask Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, because they said it very clearly. Democracy is a danger to freedom. You know, if you want to get a real explanation of democracy, understand if you are a child who has a bicycle and a gang of 5 others come up and say, I want that, that's majority rules. You know, and that's what happens. They created a government for us to protect our liberties we were born with, that God gave us. Not to say, here's what your rights are. But we are turning into a government that tells you what your rights are. Well, you don't have any anymore because, well, we didn't need them. And what I'm really concerned about, as this drama takes place daily, the news media, especially some conservative media, are diligently reporting that the left is finished, that they have no answers to Trump, that they're frustrated, they have no agenda for reaching out to the American people, day in and day out. I watch Fox News, and they are starting out, many of the shows, with, are you tired of winning yet? How wonderful it all is. The Democrats are just completely in disarray. They've got no future. And, you know, this is dangerous because it's not true. They definitely have an agenda. And I've even heard him say that there'll never be another Democrat elected president. I mean, come on. You know, but meanwhile, you just experienced how dedicated they are in a recent election here in Wisconsin. You think they had an agenda afoot? You think they've given up? You think they're walking away going, oh, golly gee, there's nothing we can do? No. They grab an election that gives them the power to completely start to change your congressional ballot borders on that can give them more votes in Congress. Their intention is to take control of Congress again, and then they'll stop all this nonsense coming from the White House. They won. See, they did not, they didn't finish. Word has come out since the election that the left knew full well that Trump was going to win. And they were well aware of the havoc that he was going to bring down on their agenda from the top at the federal government. Now, how would they keep control and keep the agenda moving forward? The answer? Attack at the local level. Now, they've been doing that all along, but now they are working much more diligently at the local level. Last October, just before the election, the World Economic Forum held an important global meeting in San Francisco. It was called the Urban Transformation Summit. You get it? The purpose of that was to begin to create new tactics to really force at the local level to put their agenda in place around any kind of government. The government in the past, as they've worked on these things, they were really being pushed forward through grant programs from HUD, EPA, Department of Transportation, and others. And Trump is moving to eliminate that. How do they keep moving forward? They're coming up with new tactics to do that. Trump's now working to eliminate many of these grant programs. So, what's their plan? They as a target city council, everything's going to be just local, local, local. And to give it more leverage, the work of the state legislature provides some of that tool that they need to have, so your local communities say, well, there's nothing we can do. The state legislature said this. These are the two prongs of what they're working on. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are the shock troops for the main global forces of the UN. The World Economic Forum, ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, are two of the main ones. ICLEI helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level. They made it their mission to impose these policies in every community in the world. And the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, if you watch him, if you look at him, if you listen to him, you will hear him. I believe that he is the perfect example of a James Bond villain. Sounds exactly like one, and he's saying exactly the same thing. Now, their job, and by the way, NGOs are really actually an official position in the United Nations structure. The organizations have to fill out forms to become approved NGOs through the UN. Their job is to carry these global policies forward. I said they're the shock troops. There are about 20,000 official NGO groups operating out of the UN structure. These activists in the NGOs are trained to promote the global agenda, to take it into governments at every level. Some focus on the full agenda. You got the big guys. You got the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, Planned Parenthood. These are official NGOs of the United Nations. But you also have, they know the whole global thing, but you also have smaller organizations that are working on very specific plans. They become experts at promoting these things. Some are even taught to run for office, including mayor, county councilman, and county supervisors, city councilmen, and state legislatures. They are taught how to run the city, how to expand the agenda across the state, and money is provided for their campaigns. Not only for their campaigns, they are buying up judges and attorney generals in states and so forth. You may have heard of one guy. His name is George Soros, I believe. Well, the big NGOs, as I said, Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund, almost every community has a chapter of the American Planning Association that is dedicated to bringing all of the sustainable programs into your city, all in the name of local, local, local. The APA's handbook is one of the main national organizing tools that they follow to put all these things in place. And by the way, we started revealing this several years ago about them, and the American Planning Association got panicked. I kind of like messing with them because they're real cowards if you really start to mess with them. And they held an important training conference to show their planners things they shouldn't say, because if you say certain words, then it makes this opposition see red. And so just back off and, well, let's just have a discussion about our community and how we want to move forward. These are the people who created comprehensive plans. We didn't have comprehensive plans before, decades ago. This is the tool to guide your community. They tell you that the comprehensive plan is to make sure that we move forward without chaos and everything is run in a well-organized manner. Comprehensive plan is really the tool to put all of their global agenda together, local, local, local. And I said, these shock troops that are leading the charge to control your elected councils and dictate these policies to impose this. But here, when I talk about changing your life like this, let me give you an example of what I mean about changing your life. How many of you heard of C40 cities? Anybody heard of those? A few of you. C40 cities promote, ready? Zero meat and dairy consumption by 2030, by the way. Zero private vehicles owned by citizens. Only one short-haul air flight per person every 3 years. That's already being put in place in Europe in many cases. And 3, here ladies, this is for you. And 3 new clothing items per person per year. How in the world do these things destroy the climate? This is about controlling our entire society and seeing how you march in lockstep with them. We already know that they use the whole COVID thing to see how far you would say yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, with my mask on. 100 cities across the world are members of C40 cities. They've signed on to this. This is their goal. Along with, in America, Austin, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, New Orleans, New York City, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Portland, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and most recently, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton. They have signed on to this. There are now NGOs working in many other cities to ban over-the-counter natural supplements, fast food, air conditioning, recreational vehicles, suburban housing, the family pet, believe it or not, plastics and fireplaces. Smart growth, stack and pack, high-rise, banning cars, and eliminating protections for single-family neighborhoods, destroying property values. The agenda goes on and on and on at the local level, and this is happening no matter what Donald Trump is doing at the top. It's being put in place. We have communities now that are banning zoning protections for single-family neighborhoods. You buy a home to live in a place you want to live in, and in a house the way you want it to be, in a backyard for the kids to play in, a place to park your car, and you choose that. And even John Adams advocated that the greatest way for the average American to build their own personal wealth was private property ownership and having a home of your own. How in the world, if you don't have your own property to stand on, can you ever think that you can exercise the First Amendment of free speech? If everything is controlled by the government, they will tell you what you can do. Several years ago, a good friend of mine was running for president in the Libertarian Party, and he was campaigning on a college campus, and they put him in this great big arena, a big coliseum, and had a small audience. And he said, "Is there someplace else we can go that would be a little more intimate?" And they said, "No, this is a free speech zone." He said, "Well, I got news for you. Anywhere I go is a free speech zone. But this is what you can expect if you don't have private property." What happens is when they take away these zoning protections for your home, their idea is planning to bring public housing, stack and pack apartments and so forth into your neighborhoods. Here's the argument that they use. People living in the ghetto and public housing are living in horrible conditions. And here are these people living in these beautiful neighborhoods. And if we can move those people up there, it's only fair when they get to live in those neighborhoods, they're going to be able to make better salaries and have a better life. Now I ask you, where you live, has that ever had any effect on the salary that you earn? Ever? No. But what happens when they bring that up there? The property values collapse. And the people who live in those neighborhoods are working to sell their property as fast as they can and get out of there. BlackRock is coming in. BlackRock is the most powerful corporate force in the world, and they are moving into these neighborhoods to put together the smart growth, sustainable development policies, and they're buying those properties for a song, and they're making a bundle of money off of it. And let me just give you some examples of some other things. When I work with local activists, many times I have Zoom meetings with their leadership to talk about their problem and give them suggestions of what they can do. I got a call from some folks in a small rural community of Colville, Washington, just recently. The state legislature is mandating the establishment of essential public facilities. In that community, under the focus of social justice, the local government is being told that they must create a behavioral health facility to accommodate the mentally ill, sex predators, and drug addicts. Now, the thing is, this facility is not built for people who live in that town with those problems. They are gathering them around the state to bring them in there. What is that going to do to the culture of that community? And they have asked the state, come on, don't do this to us. They're being ignored. In Menlo Park, California, I just talked to these people last week, NGOs are pressing the city council to eliminate 8 vital parking areas in the town's major shopping area and use the land to build high-rise public housing. There will be no place for town residents to park as they come in to shop. People who live out in the suburbs and come in to go to the stores, and so I have no way to do that. The people, the stores are screaming, you're going to kill local business. They're being ignored. This is smart growth being put in place at the local level, not the federal level, the local level. Keep that in mind. In many more communities across the nation, farmers are being forced to give up their land for wind and solar projects. Landowners in New York State have appealed to the government to stop wind projects due to health threats caused by low-frequency infrasound that it's caused by the generators. This is having adverse effect on headaches, dizziness, balance, people getting dizzy as they're doing it, nausea, and again, the state legislature is ignoring them. This is just something we need to do. Private corporations are building private wind and solar enterprises even though a majority of the citizens in these affected areas oppose the plans, local officials do nothing to protect the property owners. The power of the NGOs is driving the plan. What we have, I've never met a farmer in my life that wanted to give up the farm. That's what they want to do. They want a farm. And they are being threatened with, they're being told that, these land trust organizations are coming into them and saying, your farm could be in danger of developers taking it over, but if you sign this conservation easement, that'll make sure that your property will always be a farm. And the farmers go, oh good, that's what I need to do. They sign this conservation easement in perpetuity, forever. And believe it or not, I saw a document in Ohio that said the conservation easement would be in place in perpetuity and active in the United States and its successors. The United States could collapse and go away, but that easement's going to be in there, perpetuity. But what people don't understand is that the land trust that gets them to sign it doesn't sign anything like that. Land trusts all over the country, the Nature Conservancy being one of the biggest ones, they buy, sell, and trade these things. The farmer never knows who's in control of his land. He's told what he can do on his property. He has to keep open space over here for the wildlife. And he can't, what the cows do. We don't want to have those over there. It's awful. And, this is affecting our food supply. It is affecting their land becomes worthless when they sign that. If you are a farmer, never sign a conservation easement. In my handbook that I have back here, I have a section in there, 10 questions you should ask before ever signing one of these easements. In Iowa, South Dakota, and those areas where they're putting in the carbon capture pipeline, they have people signing easements and they're promising them money, to do this. Then they're putting this thing right across their property. When we set up utilities, all in the beginning, the electric lines and things like that, sewer lines, they always put, if it was going across your property, it was along the edge, maybe along the road, something like that. These guys will put it right in your driveway, right in front of your house. And you have no choice of any of that. And we're moving very close, and I still think we're moving close to stopping this idiotic carbon capture pipeline. By the way, carbon is not a pollutant. Every single growing thing on Earth needs carbon. So to bury it in the ground is completely idiotic. But there, get a chance to stop it. The corporations are putting this in place, have made it clear. If we stop the carbon capture pipeline, well, that easement's still theirs, and they'll use your property for something else. If a project, you sign an easement for a project, and the project doesn't go through, that thing that you signed is null and void, doesn't exist anymore. But that's not how they look at it. This is about control. And here in Wisconsin, 75% of citizens are opposed to wind and solar farms, but still the legislature won't support legislation to protect property rights and limit their abuse. We have begun to ask a very specific question of local elected leaders. Who do you represent? You are kowtowing to appointed boards. Who appoints the boards? You do. They're not your boss. You are. But I had elected officials all over the state of Iowa when we were fighting carbon capture pipelines saying, well, the Iowa Utility Board says we have to do this. And I just said, you cowards, how dare you? If you do it against the very people who elected you. If we want liberty, if we want honesty in government, we have to have a government that is controlled by the people, that is doing the job the people want them to do, not some appointed board that's filling their pockets with it. So, this is some of the questions we're beginning to ask with this kind of thing. And by the way, wind and solar are the most useless excuse for energy. They produce next to nothing, and they are one of the greatest dangers to the environment we've ever had. I find it interesting that almost every environmental program they're trying to put in place, if you begin to look at it and what it does, you will find they are more damaging to the environment than anything man has ever done in the past, that they've accused us of damaging the environment. The wind and solar, this right here, as far as the eye can see, you know, these panels, and they start cutting out all of our other forces of energy, and this will cover the entire Earth. They have this. They are now finding out that these panels are changing the atmosphere over that land, and they are finding they're creating more storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, things like that. And these panels, the way they're made, when you have them like that, they create warming. The very thing we're supposed to be protecting ourselves from. Again, when they're trying to sell the climate change plan, they tell us the Earth is going to be destroyed, our climate's going to be destroyed, and we're going to have worse storms, we're going to have warming and everything. Their very tools are what are creating it. Isn't that amazing? So, but this continues to move forward with or without Trump. The agenda moves on. It's all being pushed now at the local level as your elected officials are buying into it. There's massive pressure from these NGO stormtroopers. Surround and pressure your elected officials, which you and the residents never really see this. Now, the elected officials here tonight, I'm really hoping I will find from them that what I'm going to tell you now is true. What we don't see, because we're not there, these NGO organizations, they're massive. You probably have 100 or so working right here in this community right now, pushing individual things. They've got all this money, they've got political power because your elected officials give it to them, and they surround them, and they say, oh, hey, got it, new plan right here, got it all right here in a box for you, got the money for you too. And they press it and press it and press it. And they're everywhere. They're there 24 hours a day. We're not there. This is the key. They're not hearing from you. Why? Sometimes you get really good elected people and you wonder what happened after 6 months. They're not even talking to you. Why? Because this is what they're seeing. All they ever see or hear is from these forces. This is a new plan. This is a new plan. This is a new plan. They have national conferences that they send them to train them. And here's a new, we've got one NGO called What Works Cities. In the beginning of our country, we have uniqueness in the areas. You look at Maine versus Arizona, for example, completely different character of the way things are. But today, if you go to those places, you begin to see buildings all look alike everywhere you go. That's because groups like What Works Cities have done research on here's how a building should be done to be environmentally correct on that. And you build it, and everything starts to look alike. The character of our nation begins to disappear. You may be very proud of your county, of what you are, how different you are from others. Slowly but surely, that ends. So these NGOs surrounding all of them, they not only can't hear you, they can't see you. If one of you walks in and tries to say something about it, the NGOs are in their ear, guy's nuts, don't pay attention to him. This is literally how these things are taking place. So, now, if you think your single vote will help decide what makes local policy, you need to look back at last Tuesday and what was happening. They have a plan. They are not sitting there confused going, oh golly gee, that Trump man's, he's very nasty. I don't know what to do. They are not thinking that. They're making you think they're thinking that. Now, remember, the goal is to control the whole nation to ensure the global agenda stays in control. But if Trump has stopped at the federal level, stopped the grants as he's looking into doing, and pulling back the policies being enforced at the federal level, doesn't that stop them? How can they keep moving forward? One of the tools, the answer to that, regionalism. We already have non-elected regional boards have been operating for years that nobody's elected these people. They are, some of them represent as many as 10 or 15 counties in your state. And these are the ones who have been putting in for the grants. And not just for this county over here for a specific thing or whatever. It's all one size fits all and it covers all of them. These grants then are the way they promote and move this program ahead. And it has all the regulations that they all have to follow. And you get your elected officials saying, yes, sir, okay. The people you elected are kowtowing to these non-elected regional councils. They're the big boys at the top. And what will they tell you? If you try to talk to some of your elected officials about these programs, they're going to answer you and say, well, that's just the way it's done now. If you hear that, this is working. Well, how does the regionalism fit the global agenda? They have told us very clearly how it will. This is a quote from the UN Commission on Global Governance from back in the 1990s. Remember I said I'm only guilty of quoting them. Here's what they said, quote, regionalism must precede globalism. We foresee a seamless system of governance from local communities, individual states, regional unions, and up through the United Nations itself. Can it be any clearer? How do they continue to, well, you got a whole country to cover. And what are they going to use to get it all over the whole thing if it's not from the federal government? Well, we've just discovered something recently. The answer is mega regions, a concept created by an NGO called the Regional Plan Association. Their plan is called America 2050, and it's organized around the idea that 11 mega regions, home to 3/4 of the nation's population, are the economic engines of the nation and the new competitive units in the global economy. And this line I'm going to say here right now is taken directly from one of their documents that we found. It says, quote, its focus is the development of a national growth strategy based on the European Union. There's a force of freedom for you. Each mega region focuses around at least one major metropolitan area. Of course, there's all the usual culprits. There's New York City, Chicago, Boston, Richmond, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. They're all under the control of non-elected appointed regional boards. You can see them there. But that's not all the RPA has planned for us as we sweat in our mega regions. According to their reports, RPA is focused to, quote, hold ourselves accountable for progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trump says no at the federal level. Doesn't matter. He's going to put it all at the local level in our mega regions. That's right. So, the question comes, how do we fight back? For too long, we've let the NGOs operate in a vacuum, hardly any effective opposition. Those of us who believe in limited government, a government that, as I said earlier, is answering to the people, we want that because we really don't like government. We don't want government involved in every aspect of our lives. But when we get involved in politics, getting in campaigns and so forth, mainly we get really excited about presidential campaigns. But the local level, oh man, I've got a family to run, I've got a job to do, I've got children to raise, I've got city council oh no, I don't want to go there. And this is how it's going to become effective, right there at the local level. So we've got to build. And one of the things we do is we try to fight back. It's usually after some really bad plan has come up. And we're going, do you know about this? Do you know anything about this? What are we going to do about it? We've got to stop this. If it's already out there to that point, it's practically already in place. That's why we lose and lose and lose. We need to be on top of it from the very beginning. And the one way to do that, not just one way, the way you got to do it is to build a permanent infrastructure of activists determined to keep on top of things and to watch things as to come up so that you're not stuck flat-footed when something happens. And let me say this, I'm going to make it very clear because I know all of you are involved in other organizations. You already have organizations that you're working from. I have created the term building a freedom pod in your community, that permanent infrastructure. I don't mean that I'm creating an organization for you. What I'm trying to do is create ideas that will make the organization you already have more effective. So this is not a creation of a new organization. If you need a creation of a new organization to help you do that, but this is about taking what you already have and building some strength to it and covering things in a more effective way. And I'm going to go through this very quickly, but there's a whole lot more that can be done. And in my handbook and so forth, I have sample legislation, I've got tools, and I've got lots of details on what you need to do to do this. But the first thing that you have to do to get started is research. How many of you enjoy doing research? You'd really like to get in there and dig down in there and stuff. You're so valuable because there are many of us who don't like to do that. I like to take what you've researched and get it out there, but man, I don't sit there and dig into it all I can. So we need to do that. You've got to know who your enemy is before you can fight them. And one of the things that you can start with, there are a lot of ways to go about it, but one of the things you can start with is your local community comprehensive plan. That every community has one. This is going to tell you what their plans are. It'll tell you where the grant money came from, and it may even tell you what organizations, these NGOs, pushed it and everything. You need to know who the NGOs are. You need to know where the money came from. You need to know what's going to happen with it. And there are many ways to dig down in there. But I challenge you this: as you look through your comprehensive plan, look for one single word that says anything about protection of private property. It doesn't exist. Because I have learned 35 years of studying this, fighting it, sustainable development policy cannot be put in force if private property is protected. Sustainable development is a force against private property. And so, and you'll find as you go to talk to the promoters of all this, that they will reject private property. And you talk about trying to protect it, and there's no word in your comprehensive plan. We looked at the comprehensive plan yesterday of what was the town? Baraboo. We were in Baraboo, and Joe found in the library where we were meeting their comprehensive plan. And we looked at the very opening of it, and every single word, sustainable, 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 and it was all wording that I've gotten out of all kinds of UN documents. It's right there in the front of it. And that's going to be the case in every one of your communities, I guarantee it. Second, to organize here. And by the way, to organize, you don't need to have thousands of people to do this. If you can start with 10 or 15 people and break it down, you got your researchers over here now, and of course you need somebody who is kind of responsible for kind of pulling it together, at least making the phone calls to get you together. That's important to have. But the second thing you need are what we call the watchers. These are 3 or 4 people who volunteer to go to every single public meeting and just sit there and listen. You don't have to do anything else. Make notes of what you hear. What you'll begin to find out from this, you'll learn which members of the council, for example, are the pushers of all of this. You'll see them moving. You'll see them talking. You may even see them there on their phone during the meetings talking to somebody, or they're looking at somebody in the back of the room and go, it's okay, it's okay. Yeah, here we are. Those are the NGOs. That's who you're also going to learn. Who are they talking to? Who are they working with? And you may even hear them start to talk about, hey, Charlie, you know that plan we were talking about a few months ago? Going to start putting it in place to do blah, 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 blah in about 3 months. You know about it ahead of time. You can begin to organize and go after it now. And this is the power of that, the watchers. The speakers that you send in there to represent your movement, as they give you those 2 precious minutes from on high, you may or may not be allowed to speak. We'll see, have you talk about 30 seconds, we'll know whether we like you or not. Freedom of speech. The speakers that you bring in, don't go in there and start screaming, you idiots, we're not going to... Go in and have a reasoned argument about why you are opposed to something. I have a really effective organization I work with in Shreveport, Louisiana, who's done everything perfectly. And one of the things I've got a video of how their presenters go in. The city council was telling them the same old excuse, well, the board won't let us do this, we have to do this and that. And they had the details of why that wasn't true. And in a very reasoned way, they explained it to them. And it's at least to start this way. Now, if they keep being jerks about it and ignore you and all that, then you get a little heavier on it. But, start that way and try to be reasonable about it. And I would recommend that you don't have, first of all, don't be just one. Don't ever go in just by yourself. You will lose. You need to have others. And the speakers should represent different groups. It could just be the names of neighborhoods or something, if that's all you have, or the name of your group, whatever. That shows that you have a wider spread, and that is more effective to speak to them. The other thing, the victims. Now, why do I talk about the victims? The people who are going to be directly affected by the plan. Now, in most cases, it's everybody, but there are cases. For example, in the bigger cities, they push, the NGOs push for this plan to look at, for example, like the lower income neighborhoods. They say we can go in there and we can update the whole thing. We can make it a beautiful, beautiful place there. And so they go to move in. And the bulldozers come in and start tearing it all down. Well, in that neighborhood, you will find people who own their own home, and you will find people who own their own businesses. And all of a sudden, the bulldozers come in and knock it all down. Now, when they rebuild this beautiful palace that they're going to put together, where are the people whose homes they took? What are they doing about that? Did they get a new home? The businesses that they destroyed, now, are they going to be the businesses represented in this new beautiful center? Usually, no. It's usually global corporations. What they have then done is destroyed the hopes and the dreams of people there who were trying to struggle to get ahead. Did they care? No, because they had a grant. So this is why you go down, and when you do the research and you find something like that's about to happen, and it could be lesser than that, it could be something else going on in the neighborhood, go to those neighbors in those neighborhoods and knock on their doors and say, do you know what's about to happen in your neighborhood? This is a way that you can begin to recruit new people that have never been involved with us before into our movement. And I'll tell you what, if you get them to go into the city council to speak to them in those 2 minutes, the worst thing in the world is for them to be the ones there speaking. I mean, as far as the promoters of this are concerned, they don't want to hear from those people. That tears up their whole agenda, that they're just there to help the poor. Oh, wow, here they are telling you that you're destroying them. So this becomes a powerful weapon. Next is the media team. Now, I know every single time I say that, every eye in a place rolls. Come on, Tom. Media here is all leftist. They don't care what we have to say. They don't want to hear from us. I agree. But if you don't ever communicate with them, they're definitely going to ignore you. If you can, maybe you can find an honest reporter somewhere and you can take him information, and maybe he'll start to look at you as a reliable source of information, especially if you can prove it's true. And you never know where that's going to go. But, and by the way, I had one experience I had with a reporter. I was in Iowa, South Dakota. And this young kid reporter stood there at my table and just pummeling me with questions and questions and questions and everything. And I finally get up to speak. And I came back from doing that after I gave my talk, and I came back to my table and he was still there. And he said, some of that you said, that sounds like hate speech. And I said, well, it is. They hate it when I say it. I didn't have any more trouble with him. He was gone. But the other thing you can do, we're finding people are starting their own media, their own papers. I have a gentleman in a rural county in Virginia who started a little paper, and monthly. And the front page is reports of what's going on locally and throughout, how far it takes. But he fills up the rest of it with national writers, myself, and folks like that, to use their articles and put in there. Alex Newman's a number one, a major one they use, and they fills a paper. He takes them and distributes them once a month by taking them to filling stations and 7-Elevens or getting them on counters at stores, things like that. And he began to notice something happening as he did that. The people were standing there waiting for him and brought him in. He now is in 3 counties, and he's putting out 87,000 copies a month. People are desperate to have that kind of information. The other thing, in an example of that, I was in Ohio, and I had my literature table right out in front as people came in the front door, and a lady came in with a stack of papers and says, can I put these on your table? I said, yeah, sure, put them right there. I was shocked. Within 15 minutes, people came in the door. They went, there it is, there it is, there it is. They were gone in 15 minutes. People were excited about that paper. The other thing you can do is you can put together flyers, specific things about bad policy, things you're fighting, and you can put a flyer together with that information and pass them out door to door. One of the things you need to do, if you find that a specific elected official or an NGO or whatever the case is very responsible for this, has not listened to you, whatever, you can name them, put it on there, make them responsible for their own actions. That's number one in fighting that. They've got to feel the pressure from you. And, this group in Shreveport that I was talking about, they went around, they had Caddo Lake there. This is where it was, and people had their own boat docks and things like that, and they found out that they weren't going to be allowed to have the boat docks anymore. They put a flyer together with a picture of the boat dock, put the circle with a slash in it, and had a story on there about what's going to happen with this. They passed them out all over the place, and people began to understand they were already victims. This was coming at them. They now have 100 to 200 people show up at every city council meeting, and their spokesmen are there and everything, are winning. And they originally had this elected official, the city council, when they went to see about this, who didn't want to talk to him, said, you look like nice boys, but you're not going to have any effect on this. This is just the way it's done now. After they started doing all of these things personally, getting the message out and everything, he came up to him and said, "What can I do for you fellas? What you want to hear?" Now, the other thing, as you bring in new people, the one thing you do not want to do is take a brand new person and put them into a big responsible place of being a speaker or getting dig down into research and stuff they need to learn. But one way you can use those people, they can be, fill a seat at City Hall, at City Council meetings. They can hold signs at a rally or whatever. As they get involved that way and see what you're doing, then they can begin to learn and get more effective and find something they want to do. So that's what you do with new people. Don't intimidate them. Social media. Get a social media page, and this is a place, all those flyers and other things you put out, this is a place you can post it. You can get a larger audience as you do that. You can put petitions on there that people can sign and really spread your influence on things. The next one, and this is a goodie. You want to really get things started in town? Create a grading system. Now, JBS is already doing this with the you're doing a great job putting those things together. We can do it in every community with your city councils, so forth. You can look at the bills, the programs that have been voted on, have been passed, and you can grade them. You give them a 1 to 10. 1's pure communism, 10's freedom's heroes, that kind of thing. But then you also look who voted for these and how did they vote. And you can grade your elected officials that way. And you then have the system. Communication is key to this. I keep talking about a system. Getting information out to the people, you've got to work on that. And putting these flyers out and so forth. You could put the grading system out that way, door to door, and your elected officials are going to do a big favor for you. They're going to respond. Now you've got a public debate. You've got your details, you've got your plans, and you can prove what they're doing. Make them responsible for their actions. So, one of the most effective tools that I've learned, I mentioned this earlier, to stop the enforcement of sustainable development policy is the protection of private property rights. Sustainable development, as I said, cannot be enforced if property rights are protected. When this all started back in the 90s and into early 2000s and so forth, a lot of lawsuits were starting to come out on property rights issues. And a lot of places learned, governments learned, they didn't have a good definition. What is a property right? What do we mean by that? We have a lot of people who believe that owning their property, owning their own home is just a place to store their stuff and sleep at night. They accept all of these attacks on their property and say, oh, well, that's just the way it is. I've challenged people to ask one question of their elected officials. Name one thing I can do on my property without your permission. And a Supreme Court justice from the state of Washington, Richard Sanders, wrote this definition to get around the problem. He said, quote, "Property in a thing consists not merely in its ownership and possession, but in the unrestricted right of use, enjoyment, and disposal. Anything which destroys any of the elements of property to that extent destroys the property itself. The substantial value of property lies in its use. If the right of use be denied, the value of the property is annihilated and ownership becomes a barren right." That's what most of us are living with, is a barren right. Now, there's one word in there that, when used, will blow the heads right off all the tyranny people, the leftists. Unrestricted. Oh, no. I had a legislator in the state of North Carolina who wanted to use that definition in some legislation. He introduced it. The NGOs went all over the state to mayors and city councils and to oppose this. And I'm not kidding about this. This is absolutely true. The argument that they used over and over again is, if somebody has unrestricted right to their property, they might put a smelly old pig farm next door to you. Oh, this is the answer. This is what they did. And, this is how they react to it. Understand, we're not advocating anarchy here. We say unrestricted. Since the beginning of human settlements, there have been nuisance laws. If somebody is doing something on their property that damages yours, that affects yours, you have a legal right to do something about that. And the first thing you do, let's say you've got a neighbor that's got a bright light shining in your bedroom window at night, it's got loud music, maybe it's got a smell going, maybe there's an old pig farm next door, I don't know. Then you've got a right to go over, say, Charlie, can you turn that light off at night? It's shining in my window, I can't sleep. And Charlie, if he's a good guy, he says, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, okay, I'll take care of it. Neighbor to neighbor, taken care of. No government involved, neighbor to neighbor. If Charlie is a jerk, you take him to court. Nuisance laws. That's the way it works with representative government and working for you. So, we have organized some very successful freedom pods, and we've won some important victories. I have a group down in Pickens County, South Carolina, called the Conservatives of the Upstate. They researched the local development. I went there to speak, and the lady, Janelle Raines, who was the head of this group, it's in the rural area, and she had the Freedom Pod list there, and she had her notebook, and she was trying to put the names of her different activists down on there that would do those different jobs, and they weren't cooperating. She was really worried. They're not doing, how am I going to get this going? And I got up to speak, and I went through all this list of things to do. For some reason, when I mentioned the doing the grading system, that clicked with them. And they decided to do that. And they did it. They went in and did all that research, and they put out a grading system and so forth, and they did it. And they got their Freedom Pod going. Just right now, they're really working on the local public library that is putting all this, smut out there for kids and everything. They're leading that campaign right now. They're working very actively, but it got them involved to do it. In Tennessee, local activists from across the state scored a major victory in stopping a dangerous new attack on local governments called Region Smart. The plan was to combine non-elected regional committees in 3 states altogether to make one-size-fits-all policy to impose all of their usual control on trade and commerce and banking and everything, all under one appointed agency's control. Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi were the test case. My vice president, Kathleen Marquardt, wrote an article, she researched it, wrote an article, exposed the plan, and led activists. The activists grabbed this thing up and they pummeled the state legislature to stop this and demanded that they do that, and it worked. And Tennessee was the first to pull the bill. Mississippi followed, and it died right then. So we won that one. I've told you about these nice boys in Shreveport, Louisiana. I've always said, if you really work in your own community on this and become effective, focus right there on your community. Don't worry about other communities. Focus on yours. If that's what you're focusing on, then if you win, if you succeed, another community is going to say, "How'd you do that?" And it begins to grow. If you get good people elected on this basis, on the local plans, then in your local communities, then the good people begin to move up and get into higher office, and then it'll eventually affect the legislature, and then it'll affect Congress as we move forward. You cannot save the republic in one day. It is vitally important that you focus on one issue and win that issue and then build on that. And there's so many things being thrown at us that, it's hard to keep our focus, but and there's all kinds of issues. So I'm not saying you have to do it just, property rights or something like that. I'm saying that's more effective, I think. But, there is the issues of gun control and abortion and the education issue. Everything I'm talking about here will work on on school boards and so forth. So I think we are on the verge of winning to stop the carbon capture pipelines. I think we're going to win that. How? We must bring the passion and determination into the fight like they have for our property, our local businesses, our personal freedoms. You must be involved. We need to change the debate. The debate needs to become about freedom, not about all of their control, control, control. Yes, we are facing a dedicated, determined enemy like no generation of Americans have ever faced before. But our Constitution and our republic that it created are not dead. It's suffering from neglect. How do we stop them? Get equally determined to win to restore our republic that has been the envy of the world. You can try sawing off the limbs, or you can work to destroy the roots. It's one thing or another. We have to stand and fight at the state and the local levels. Change the debate to attack anti-freedom policies, expose non-governmental organizations. These are carpetbaggers. They are not stakeholders. You are the stakeholders. Don't ever let them get away with saying, well, we're talking to the stakeholders. No, you're not, because we're all over here and you're ignoring us. So, we have to force elected officials to be personally responsible for their own actions. And by the way, I want to say specifically, we have from some of my conversations already tonight, very good elected officials here who are dedicated to our cause of freedom. They're in a minority, they always are. Now, what we have to do is support them, be behind them. That will give them much more strength to move forward and help start moving these policies and stand there and fight. Imagine if, we sit there and go, well, they're up there, they have to do it. Well, if that's the case, sticking their neck out all by themselves is a way to, why would they do that? Would you? They need us behind them so that they have the strength to move forward and be bold. So keep that in mind because they are valuable, valuable people to our fight. Thank you for what you guys are doing. And do not accept a local official saying to you, well, that's just the way it's done. Coward. Build that permanent infrastructure. Then every time the NGOs come up with a new plan, you won't be caught flat-footed. You will have your organization ready to jump in and to take action and smash it. You don't need a majority of citizens behind you. You can have an effective impact with just 15 or 20 dedicated activists to stay in that infrastructure. If you have all of you here now, if you come together, this would be a force nobody could stop. So, Donald Trump is working hard at the federal level, but he cannot do this alone. This is not the time to stand aside. This is the most important time in our lives to take action. So one final time today, I ask you, what do you do? Why are you here? And what will you do? Join me and let's stop these evil forces that believe that we don't have the will to fight. Thank you.